Norwegian Foreign Minister Espen Barth has expressed concern over decisions by the Israeli government on a ceasefire deal being signed. Eide, who was in South Africa on an official visit last week, says more that could be done by the United States to ensure a truce, or really more could be done, right? Aldrin spoke to Eide just after the Israeli cabinet had resolved to keep the IDF at the contentious Philadelphi Corridor.
Considering the negotiations around a ceasefire, do you think that this makes it even more difficult to reach that particular point?
This is one of the contested issues. What is the future presence of IDF in the Philadelphi Corridor? And my sense is that it has not become any easier to arrive at an agreed settlement or a ceasefire with this demand. And I have learned that key members of the Israeli delegations themselves have been saying that Netanyahu adding more demands is making it more difficult. These are already difficult conversations, but when you negotiate, you normally give up on some position to achieve something else. You do not add additional demands if you actually want to get to an agreement. Now, I don't know the details of this recent statement, but I am very adamant to say we need a ceasefire now. We need to stop the violence in Gaza now. And as soon as we have a ceasefire, we need to move forward to what can be a real solution, which is to finally establish a Palestinian state, make sure that they can also have authority in Gaza, and then start working with them to rebuild Gaza, but not only physically, but also politically and institutionally.
What's your interpretation of the statement of the Israeli National Security Minister that they want to actually build a synagogue inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque?
Well, I think that's an incredibly dangerous statement and a very bad idea. Jerusalem, which is the birthplace of several world religions, have actually found some kind of modus vivendi of where Christians, Jews, and Muslims respect each other's most holy places, which tend to be very close to each other. I know Jerusalem well, and you can walk in minutes from the most sacred part of Christianity to the most sacred elements of Islam, and trying to mess with that, I think, is a recipe for disaster. And we have been very clear, together with so many other countries, in saying that the security minister's statements should be condemned.
Yeah. Considering the resolution that has been taken by the United Nations Security Council to support the draft proposal by the United States for a ceasefire, is there anything that a multilateral body like the United Nations can do to ensure that there is adherence, compliance to the resolution one, but also the decision that was taken by the ICJ that said that Israel should actually vacate these occupied territories in Palestine?
So, you know, the decision of ICJ in the occupation case is something we actively intervened in and supported, and the final judgment, it is an advisory opinion to the UN General Assembly, but it's an important opinion, and it confirms that the occupation is illegal, that it pertains to annexation, and that Israel should, as you say, vacate. Now, the problem is that these bodies do not have enforcement mechanisms of their own. So they establish legality, but there is no UN force that comes down and throws people out. So it requires that key members of the Security Council actually acts, and so far that has not happened to the extent we would have liked to see.
Yeah. Early on, when you were speaking about countries that have political power, economic power, and sometimes even military power, that they must use that power. If they don't use that power, that is neglect. Is that the case with the United States?
Well, I think that those players who have real influence on the parties, and in the case of Israel, that of course is the US, should use the resources they have to make sure that there is compliance with the agreements that has been made in the most important bodies of international affairs.
Are they failing, though? Is the US failing in that part?
So what I will say is that I am not seeing I am seeing a US government that is talking about ceasefire, that is actively trying to reach a ceasefire, but right at the moment we are not seeing that enough power is used to actually enforce that decision. And of course the same thing goes for those who have direct influence on Hamas.
Just finally, on the Security Council and the reform of the Security Council, it's something that comes up over and over again every single year, and Africa has been pushing for a permanent member, at least, to be part of the Security Council. Where does Norway stand on this? And do you think there is room to convince the other permanent members of the Security Council that at least bring in one African country?
So our position is very clear. We support the African call for seats at the Security Council. We've actually supported the idea of 2, and we were in the Security Council. We were actively arguing for that, but of course this has to be done by a change in the charter. And the problem with the charter is, although it can be adopted by a qualified majority, the veto powers also have veto against the change of the charter. So you need to convince them as well. But Norway's support is very clear. We believe Africa should be represented at the Security Council, and we hope that the upcoming Summit of the Future will take us in that direction. To be frank, I don't think we will solve this in a month, but I think it could be a pointer to where to develop.
Yeah. Do you think a reform of the United Nations Security Council could actually mean it could mean a position being created, the fertile ground towards peace, for instance, in Europe, especially when we speak about Russia and Ukraine?
So I am very much in favor of a more representative Security Council, which is why we support African seats. I would say that in order for that Security Council to work, it also has to become more effective. Because if you just add more people with vetoes, you will statistically have more vetoes. So you need to work on the efficiency as well, which is why I always say, yes, we should increase the representation, but we should also increase the efficiency or the delivery of the key service of the Council. And frankly, I'm not sure if the reform of the Council will solve the Ukraine problem, because the key players there are at odds with each other anyway. If we remove the veto, that could help, but that's not in the making. If we made it less forceful, less powerful, maybe we could get somewhere.
Minister, thank you so much for your time.